Alright, hi everyone. I hope that this is finding everyone safe and well. First of all, we're in some kind of rough times right now, and I want to reiterate how much I appreciate and respect all of you who are still finding the self discipline and the courage to keep doing such excellent work in this class and getting ready to be the leaders of tomorrow who are going to help to make the world a better place going forward. Alright? So we started looking at our treatment of the living environment on Monday with Peter Singer, who argued that non-human animals deserve equal moral consideration to human beings. Because our basis for granting moral consideration to an organism is its capacity to suffer and to feel pain, and in those respects, animals are equal to human beings, so we should take their interests in not suffering or feeling pain into account when we decide how to treat them. Now, I find Singer's argument to be a very powerful one, both intellectually and emotionally, and you could probably guess that from my presentation of the material. Now, today we're going to look at McMahan, who extends Singer's argument to what might be its logical conclusion, but it's also a position that a lot of you are going to find to be absurd, right? But we shouldn't just dismiss this argument out of hand. We should give it some consideration. We should carefully consider it and then see what we think. Now, Singer was entirely concerned with our own treatment of animals, especially like the horrible conditions of factory farming and the intense confinement that it inflicts on animals, and also laboratory experimentation that's not absolutely necessary. So those are what you would call negative rights, which are obligations not to do something to some entity. So we all acknowledge that we have an obligation not to inflict pain or suffering when it comes to other human beings. And almost all of us extend these obligations to non-human animals, at least to some extent. Singer, he wants to fully extend those obligations to non-human animals in the same way that we grant them to other humans. What Singer does not discuss are positive rights, which are obligations to do something to or for some entity. Now, positive rights, they tend to be a lot more controversial, even for other human beings, and you can kind of guess by the political climate in the United States right now. There's not a lot of agreement that people even get basic positive rights, right? Whether they have a right to basic things like sustenance or medical care. But one thing we almost all agree on is that we have an obligation to provide physical security against violent harm, right? And that's why we pay taxes for the enforcement of laws against violent behavior. We have, police and a military and things like that. And it's why we take it upon ourselves as a moral responsibility to intervene if we see someone becoming the victim of a violent crime. So McMahan is asking, if we take Singer's argument seriously, why aren't we extending these positive claims to non-human animals as well as negative ones? So nature may look calm and peaceful, but it's brutal. It's far more brutal than any human society. It's an endless struggle of predator and prey, and billions of creatures perish painfully and fearfully in this struggle every single year. So, if we could do something about this, why shouldn't we? Now, it's important to understand what McMahan has in mind here. It's not like running out there and just wiping out carnivore species, and because he's aware that's not only morally questionable, it's using violence to solve violence, but it's also going to have terrible ecological consequences. Instead, what he's thinking of is like some sort of far future situation where we may have technologies that we can't currently imagine, and then we can somehow gently nudge carnivores out, maybe by sterilizing them or by somehow like modifying them so they all eat tofu or something without causing any kind of ecological disaster. Now, of course, this may sound pretty far-fetched and abstract, but look, even 100 years ago, no one thought that we would ever have weapons that could destroy the world and wipe out all life on Earth. And if we thought about that before we did have such technology, maybe we would have benefited a great deal from that. So this idea that McMahan has, it raises a number of deep issues concerning human respect for nature and the value of nature and the ecology. So the fact that you're in a philosophy of the environment class in the first place, that means that most of you probably have some concept of nature in the biosphere as being worth preserving, as being valuable in its own right. But nature is an abstract concept, and that abstract concept certainly has no ability to suffer, to feel pain or fear, and in that way it's unlike those individual organisms that make it up. So when push comes to shove, whose interests do we favor? Those of the creatures that would suffer if we don't act are those of like this abstract system that we call the ecosystem or the biosphere. Now, McMahan's talking about this at a fairly abstract level because, of course, we're not in a situation to act in the way that he's discussing. But the problem's worth considering as an extreme example of how we might want to think about this conflict between concern for the welfare of individual creatures and that of more abstract and diffuse concepts like nature, biodiversity, and ecology. So next week we're going to discuss less far-fetched ways in which animal welfare and ecology might conflict, and this is going to set us up to finish the course by considering cases in which human interests might conflict with ecology. Alright, so everyone stay safe and take care, and I'll see you again next week.